Boring history for sleep? What medieval inns served for midnight snacks? Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when people snacked on things that might horrify modern taste buds and somehow called it comfort food. We re-creeping into the smoky halls of a medieval inn. Just as the last travelers dragged their mud-caked boots over the threshold, you hear the heavy groan of the wooden door behind you and feel the shift from night chill to the stifling embrace of smoke, sweat, and something stewing. Possibly mutton. Possibly something that used to be mutton. The air is thick, lit mostly by the hearth, its flames spitting little sparks like it resents being kept awake this long. Shadows twitch against the walls, and the rafters above are dotted with soot clumps that threaten to drop like sleepy bats. A heavy iron pot swings lazily over the fire, its contents burbling in protest. This is where we begin. Soot and stew at sundown. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're re-listening from somewhere weirdly specific, like a yurt in Saskatchewan or a laundromat in Tokyo, drop your location and the time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bench you sit on is smooth from hundreds of nights like this. Travelers mutter quietly, nursing aches and ale. Some have come far, their cloaks dusted with miles of travel grime. You, dear listener, have wandered in just in time for the tail end of supper. The full meals are long gone, scarfed down at dusk. But for those arriving late like you, there's something left. It's not much, but something. The innkeeper, a hunched and leathery woman with arms like fireplace tools, pokes the pot with a ladle the size of your forearm. The stew smells ... serviceable. A meaty aroma clings to the air like it paid rent. You ask what's in it? She shrugs. It's, she says. Well, that clears things up. You lean in to look. There are clearly roots of some kind. A few withered onions, possibly turnip, possibly parsnip, and chunks of what could be meat. Or a very brave mushroom. Mainstream historians agree that such stews called pottage were the cornerstone of medieval peasant and traveler diets. Basically, everything edible went in the pot and kept bubbling for days. Leftovers weren't just expected, they were the foundation of the meal. And as the evening wore on, the stew absorbed everything thrown its way. Broth, bones, herbs, sometimes even a scrap of yesterday's bread to thicken it up. That's right, you might be sipping a little bit of last Thursday's carrots tonight. A mild panic sets in when you find something chewy. Not quite meat, not quite vegetable, not quite describable, but you smile politely. This isn't the sort of place where complaining helps, especially not when you hear a soft rustling near the hearth. Probably a rat, probably somewhere in a dark corner. Someone's spoon clinks rhythmically against a wooden bowl. You get a flash of a face lit orange by firelight. It's not friendly, but not unfriendly either, just tired. That same exhausted expression stretches across most of the room: farmers, laborers, maybe even a monk or two. Everyone's sharing one thing: hunger that doesn't care what the stew tastes like. You try to recall the last time you ate something spicy? It wasn't here. In fact, spices were pricey, like lock them in a box guarded by monks pricey. Most inns stretched their seasoning no further than salt and whatever herbs they could forage or grow out back. Parsley, sage, maybe even some garlic if the innkeeper was feeling generous. Historians still argue whether wild herbs were used to add flavor or to cover up the fact that meat had. It's already gone a little daring. You're halfway through your bowl when someone in the room lets out a high-pitched snore mid-chew. You wonder if it's the meal or the day's travel finally catching up. Few diners are already slumped forward on the tables, snoozing among their crumbs like content barn cats. You're tempted to follow suit, but your spoon's still mostly full, and the innkeeper is watching. A fringe belief from the time claimed that stew left too long on the hearth would remember the flavors of all the things cooked before it, like a living thing, not metaphorically. Literally, the belief was that pottage had a kind of memory and would spoil in strange ways if mistreated. Stirred too fast, and it might sour. Stir too slow, and it might rot from bitterness. A food with moods. Excellent. There's a basket of hard bread on the table, but you're not there yet. You're still navigating the mysterious depths of your midnight soup. You spot a floating piece of barley, or is that oat? Either way, it's a chewy surprise in the bland slurry. The consistency is like gravy, got bored, and tried to become porridge. The room shifts around you as more guests filter in from the rain cloaks dripping, faces pale with moonlight and weariness. They murmur to each other in regional accents, some thick enough to slice with a knife. Not that the inn has knives for guests. You get a spoon, and you're lucky to have it. One elderly traveler beside you asks if you've tried the stew yet. You nod politely. He chuckles and says he's had worse. He tells you about an inn up north that served eel-stuffed dumplings for late-night meals. The eels were still twitching, he says, and you almost believe him. Medieval inns were known for creativity in the face of scarcity, after all. A sharp breeze cuts through the cracks in the wall and a few candles gutter. Somewhere behind you, a dog lets out a soft growl, quieted by a pat on the head. The innkeeper starts ladling more stew into fresh bowls for the latest arrivals, the liquid splashing with a hiss onto the wooden table. The bowl in front of you is nearly empty now, just a stubborn film clinging to the bottom. You set the spoon down slowly. You've survived the first course of your midnight adventure. The stew may not have been elegant, but it filled a hole, and hopefully not with regret. The fire cracks again, throwing sparks like tiny fireflies into the dark. You lean back, letting the low thrum of quiet conversation and clinking bowls carry you deeper into the strange and smoky. Quiet of a world that forgot fast food and invented something stickier, stranger, and a little more memorable. The bowl's been cleared, but you're not off the hook just yet. The innkeeper returns not with a smile, mind you, just the practiced grunt of someone who's dealt with far too many travelers and not enough decent coin. She slams down what appears to be a loaf. Technically, you squint at it. The crust is the color of firewood and almost as dense. It lands with a thud that echoes more than seems reasonable. Congratulations, you've just met the medieval midnight bread. No, this isn't your pillowy sourdough or buttery brioche. This is the kind of bread that laughs at dental work. You tap it gently with your knuckles, half expecting it to ring like a church bell. It doesn't, but it does dent your fingernail. You attempt to tear a piece off. It resists. There's a reason this type of bread was sometimes used as a plate trencher, they called it. And frankly, that sounds like an insult to trenchers. Mainstream historians agree that most medieval bread was made from whatever grain was on hand, usually coarse barley or rye. Refined white wheat was for nobles and monasteries with access to fine mills. Here at a traveler's inn with a roof that sags like it's had enough of everything, you're getting black bread or brown at best. Heavy, nutty, often bitter, occasionally sour and not in the trendy way. You finally wedge a bite loose, tear it open, and ... yeah, it's as dry as you feared. Bits of bran tumble down your tunic like sawdust. You chew and chew. It's like eating a slice of history. Only history was baked too long and left behind the stove. Across the room, someone else has gone full barbarian on their loaf, breaking it apart with both hands, gnawing like a desperate squirrel. Another traveler has dunked hers directly into the stew, letting it soak until it resembles something you might mistake for edible. You consider following suit, but the stew's gone now. You're on your own. Here's a quirky tidbit. In particularly poor regions, bread could sometimes be made from ground peas, acorns, or even tree bark mixed into the flour. Yes, tree bark. A little-known fringe practice used during famines or hard winters. Technically still bread. Technically. You hear a groan across the table. Young man holds his jaw and mutters something about a cracked molar. The innkeeper walks by and slaps him on the back with the tenderness of a bear. Should have dunked it first, she mumbles, noted. Historians still argue whether hard bread was meant to be eaten fresh or used more like a utensil or vessel. In many cases, stale trenchers were given to the poor or fed to dogs after the meal, assuming the bread itself had dainty gone moldy in creative ways. In richer households, used bread soaked with juices from meat and sauces might be scraped into bowls and served as second helpings. Waste not, want not, and if the food doesn't kill you, the bread might. You test the crust again, now fully embracing its potential as a weapon. In a pinch, this loaf could fend off a burglar. You imagine it featured in many tavern brawls, not thrown, just wielded like a truncheon, a medieval baguette bat. There's a smear of something soft on the breadboard. Lard, maybe, or old butter. Either way, you scoop a little onto your hunk and smear it with the back of your spoon. The fat helps. Sort of. At least your jaw stops sending distress signals. There's some comfort here in this crude ritual. Everyone else is doing the same chewing, through the fatigue. sharing a few tired jokes, breaking off pieces and passing them to the kids. A toddler grabs a chunk and promptly drops it on the floor, where the inn's shaggy mutt swoops in and snatches it. Even he takes a moment to reconsider before chewing. To your left, someone mentions Maslin bread, a blend of wheat and rye, a little more forgiving to the teeth, if you're lucky. Apparently, the baker down in the next village mixes in dried apples when he's flush. You consider traveling there, but that's tomorrow's use problem. A soft snore drifts through the beams overhead. Someone's fallen asleep in the hayloft. The room quiets down as more travelers lean back, bellies not full but no longer clawing at their spines. You can almost feel the collective ache settle into the benches, the momentary peace after a meal, no matter how unglamorous. A few guests compare breads from different regions. One swears by oatcakes in the north. Another describes a flat, griddled barley bread eaten with honey in the south. Someone claims to have tried a saffron loaf once. The room goes silent for a beat. Saffron? That's like saying you casually nibbled on a gold coin. And just as things start to settle, there's a loud crack. A guest's bread finally yields in a dramatic split, launching a flake of crust across the room. It lands in someone else's mug. There's laughter. Actual, honest laughter. Maybe the bread wasn't delicious, but it did what food's always meant to do. It brought strangers a little closer, even if only through dental trauma. You rest your elbow on the table, head tilting toward your shoulder. The fire settled into a pulsing glow. Someone's carving their name into the bench in old habit, probably done by hundreds before. You run your fingers over the grooves of previous travelers' marks. It's oddly comforting. Proof that you're not the first to wrestle this indigestible anvil disguised as bread. You take one last bite, just to say you did, and tuck the rest into your satchel. Could be useful later doorstop. Fire starter, emergency bludgeon. Versatile stuff? Really. As the inn drifts towards silence and embers, you realize this was less of a snack and more of a rite of passage. Bread may be humble, but in the medieval world, it was also survival. If it's hard as stone, that's just extra insurance against famine or nighttime burglars. The room darkens a little more, and you catch the scent of ale nearby. Next course, hopefully. Your jaw could use a break. You shift in your seat, cradling what's left of your pride and jaw strength after the bread ordeal, when a wooden mug sloshes down in front of you. The liquid inside is cloudy, amber, and lightly frothy. Just enough fizz to let you know it's alive. The innkeeper grunts again and mutters something like, "Drink up, you'll sleep better." And now it's official. Welcome to the nightly ale ritual. This isn't your crisp craft IPA or fruity cider from a modern tap room. No, this ale is thick and warm and slightly suspicious. You lift the mug to your nose and get hit with a smell that's part yeast, part grain, and part what exactly is that? Still, you sip. And surprisingly, not bad. It's malty earthy, and just a little sour, like someone tried to make tea out of toast and forgot the sugar. You can work with this. Ale was the staple drink of medieval Europe. Mainstream history makes no bones about it. Everyone from children to elders drank it. Why? Because the water was often unsafe, riddled with bacteria from human waste, livestock runoff, or that charming hole in the ground latrine just outside. Boiling water for tea or broth was a luxury. Ale, with its mild fermentation and boiling brew process, was safer, more filling, and didn't come with dysentery as a side effect. You take another sip. It warms your chest a bit. It's not like brandy, but enough to make your shoulders drop half an inch. Around you, others are doing the same. A couple near the hearth clink mugs. Someone lets out a little burp and doesn't even apologize. The man who cracked his tooth on the bread earlier now cradles his ale like it's a love letter. And here's the fun part. Most medieval ale wasn't all that alcoholic. It was called small ale light, meant for hydration and mild cheer rather than wild parties. Think of it as Gatorade for serfs. That being said, inns often had a stronger batch reserved for the more adventurous night owls. And judging by the heavy-lidded eyes at the far table, someone's definitely found that stash. You swirl the ale in your cup and notice sediment gathering at the bottom. Not unusual. Stuff isn't filtered, pasteurized, or chilled. It's ale in its rawest form, what today would probably be sold at a hipster tavern for $14, and come with a beard wax sample. Back then, it was lifeblood. Grain-based, filling, and just fermented enough to take the edge off an evening of cold toes and clunky bread. Nearby, a traveler explains the brewing process like he invented it. Mash the barley, boil it, let it sit. Stir it with a stick, passed down from your nan. Always the same stick, he insists, tapping the side of his mug for emphasis. You raise an eyebrow. The magic brewing stick was a real belief in some parts of medieval Europe. Certain brewers claimed the yeast had soaked into their stirring paddle and would ensure perfect fermentation every time. Whether true or not, yeast did cling to surfaces, so the stick might have been more science than superstition. Still, historians argue whether such starter tools made any real difference in taste, or if brewers just liked sounding mysterious. While ladling out mug after mug to sleepy travelers like you peer down into your cup again. There's something soothing about the way the ale sits heavy and warm in your belly. It dulls the corners of the evening. Outside, rain taps on the shutters in a lazy rhythm. The fire lets out a low pop, followed by a sigh of smoke. The inn's mood has shifted. There's less talking now, more slow sipping. A few patrons hum low tunes, old songs that sound like lullabies but were probably written to ward off curses. Someone in the corner quietly begins playing a stringed instrument, maybe a crwth, maybe a really battered lute, and you catch the faint warble of something vaguely melodic. The ale helps the music sound better somehow, or at least less sharp. Across the table, an elderly woman dips the end of her bread into her ale. You tilt your head, softens the crust, she croaks. And the memories. Then she nods like that, explains everything. You try it, it kinda works. A quirky fact you overhear: some inns would flavor their ale with herbs like rosemary, sage, or yarrow, especially before hops became widely used. Hops didn't become common in England until around the 15th century, and even then they were met with suspicion. Too bitter, too foreign, too Dutch. Instead, alewives, yes, often women brewed. It would toss in all sorts of local greenery to make it taste less like grainy bathwater. There's a heated, whispery debate now at the end of the table. A pair of travelers are arguing about whether drinking too much ale before bed invites night spirits. One insists he saw a black shadow cat crawl out of a mug once. The other says that's what happens when you drink out of a shoe. Hard to argue with either, really. And here you are, halfway through your mug, wondering how this Inhazen tea collapsed under the sheer volume of odd beliefs steeped into its beams. This ale is probably older than some monarchs. You swirl the last sip, noticing the foam leaves behind faint rings inside the cup, like tree rings, only slightly stickier. Your head dips for a moment. You're not drunk, but you're definitely warmer, sleepier. That safe, fuzzy sensation spreading through your chest like someone wrapped your ribs in wool. You set the mug down. The table's sticky, but that's par for the course. Everything in this place is either sticky, crumbly, or dangerously firm. You start to categorize the furniture by splinter potential. As you lean back, the same traveler who spoke of the shadow cat begins a story about an inn in Normandy that brewed its ale with nettles and honey. And anyone who drank it would fall asleep with prophetic dreams. You're tempted to call it nonsense, until you realize you've already forgotten the names of half the people around you. You're either slipping into a doze, or gently becoming medieval. You glance once more at the ale, now just foam and dregs. No dreams yet, but there's time. But the night's still young, and your next surprise is already being plunked onto the table with another satisfied grunt from the innkeeper. You barely have time to nudge your empty ale mug aside before something new lands in front of you with an audible squelch. It's greyish, lumpy, and steaming in a suspiciously enthusiastic way. You blink at it. A bowl of something thick, gloopy, possibly porridge, possibly an offense to porridge. It smells earthy, almost nutty, with a sharp sour note underneath, like someone squeezed a lemon near a compost pile and called it a day. You stare, then poke it gently with your spoon. It jiggles, which no food should do uninvited after midnight. Congratulations, brave traveler. You've now met the dubious delight known as pottage, the medieval, every meal, miracle slop. Pottage was the lifeblood of peasant cuisine. It was breakfast, lunch, dinner, and yes, sometimes even midnight snack, especially when stretched thin by a long journey. Mainstream history calls it the staple dish of the common folk, a hearty, vegetable-based stool like porridge, thickened with oats, barley, or beans, and tossed together with whatever scraps the cook could find. Not glamorous, not consistent, but filling. You brave a spoonful. It's better than it looks. Barely. The grains give it a chewy base, and there's the occasional surprise chunk of turnip or leek. Maybe even a flicker of garlic, hard to say. The flavors meld into something comforting if you let your expectations sink low enough. Think of it like edible beige. You're not eating it because you want to. You're eating it because it's there. And yet, despite the grim appearance, it was genius in its way. Easy to cook, easy to stretch, and endlessly adaptable. A little bacon fat, throw it in, half a cabbage leaf, toss it. A pigeon foot go wild. Pottage was the original clean out the fridge meal, except the fridge was a dirt cellar, and the expiration date was EH. It smells fine. A quirky tidbit you overhear. Some inns would serve fool-s pottage late at night, so named because it looked like it contained meat, but didn't. A prank on hungry guests? Or just a cost-saving measure? That bowl of yours might qualify. You haven't spotted a single morsel of meat. You squint, stirring slowly. There's a floating speck that might be ham, or an aggressive carrot. Across from you, a large man with soot-dark hands slurps his own bowl with enthusiasm. "This one's better than mine last week," he says to no one in particular. "That one had a shoe in it." You nod politely, unsure whether to laugh or leave. Historians still argue whether pottage recipes varied more by region or by class, while the base ingredients, grain, vegetables, herbs, remained the same. The toppings, or lack thereof, could transform a bowl from peasant mush to night supper. Wealthier inns added venison, fowl, or salted fish. Poorer ones leaned into onions, wild greens, and sheer optimism. You find a sprig of something green in your bowl. Possibly parsley. Possibly moss. Either way, it adds a little texture. The heat from the dish is lulling now, spreading through your belly like the coals in the hearth behind you. This is what pottage was for, late-night warmth. Low expectations, mildly exceeded. A quiet debate starts at a nearby table, someone insisting that monks made the best pottage, while another claims that traveling cooks were the true masters. One man leans in to say his grandmother added ground almonds to hers, making it fancy. Another scoffs almonds. In this century, you scrape your spoon along the bowl's bottom, chasing the last stubborn blob. It's sticking like it knows it's unpopular. Still, you get it. And with that final bite, your stomach groans not unhappily, just surprised. You hadn't expected to feel even slightly full tonight. And yet, between the stale bread, warm ale, and this medieval paste, you're halfway to a nap. At the far end of the room, a boy plays with a spoon, flinging blobs of pottage at a rat perched on a beam overhead. The rat looks mildly offended. You suspect he's seen worse. Someone mentions frumenty, a pottage cousin made with boiled wheat and milk, sometimes flavored with dried fruits or beef broth. It was popular among travelers for its gentle consistency and energy. You imagine it as the medieval answer to oatmeal, crossed with beef stew. It's kind of like if your breakfast cereal had performance anxiety. And here's a fun image. In times of extreme poverty, some pottage variations skipped actual grain altogether, relying on boiled nettles, sorrel, or even dandelion greens. You chew thoughtfully, wondering if you've just eaten a wild plant or the corner of someone's wool tunic. The noise in the room softens again. Ale mugs clink less often. A fire hisses. A dog lets out a wheezy sigh under your bench. You can feel your limbs getting heavier, your eyelids joining them in protest. It's not just the food that's doing it. It's the whole rhythm of this strange little communal ritual. The scraping of wooden spoons on bowls, the slosh of ale, the creaking beams, and the soft argument about whether eel should count as meat or fish during Lent. Historians still argue that. 2. You notice someone tucking a crust of trencher into their pocket for morning, resourceful, or maybe just traumatized by an earlier famine. Either way, you're learning. And here's the thing. When the sun goes down in the medieval world, the rules shift. Meals become less about variety and more about comfort. The inn's job isn't to wow you. It's to keep you from keeling over from hunger before dawn. It delivers that, more or less. It's the rest. Details. Your bowl is empty now. Someone takes it without asking, replaces it with a hunk of cheese the size of your palm, hard, crumbly, and smelling faintly of feet. But we'll get to that next. You lean back, belly full of weird texture and vague nutrition. The fire crackles. The shutters rattle gently. And for a moment, just a moment, you could be any tired traveler across any year in 1,000. The cheese arrives without fanfare. Just a thunk on the table and a nod from the innkeeper. That might also be a warning. It's pale, vaguely yellow, and emits a scent that's part barnyard, part sock drawer. You pick it up. It fights back dry, crumbly, and dense enough to serve as building material. Honestly, you wouldn't be surprised if some of the NS structural beams were just reinforced cheddar. Still, you break off a chunk. It resists your fingers with the gritty defiance of a food that knows you have no other options. Into your mouth it goes, and the flavor hits fast, salty, tangy, slightly nutty. It's not bad. In fact, in a weirdly aggressive way, it's satisfying. The kind of snack that reminds you you're alive and still have teeth. Welcome to the nocturnal joys of medieval hard cheese, the midnight snack you didn't know you needed. Like the pottage, cheese was actually considered a bit of a treat, especially this late at night. It's made from cow, sheep, or goat's milk, depending on region. In season, it was one of the few medieval foods that traveled well and aged without becoming a war crime. It's kept wheels of it tucked in root cellars, wrapped in cloth, sometimes waxed, often just left to become extra flavorful in the dark. You chew slowly. This particular specimen leans into the sharper side of the spectrum. There's a slight crumble that dusts your fingers, and the finish is vaguely smoky, perhaps from aging near the fire or from a happy accident involving a chimney collapse. Either way, your palate is awake again. Mainstream historians often mention that cheese was a dietary staple for both peasants and nobility, though the types and preparation varied wildly. For nobles, cheese might be soft, spiced, wrapped in herbs, and presented with fruit. For you, here in this midnight moment, it's basically edible masonry. A man beside you mumbles about sage cheese, a green marbled block, sometimes found in inns around Lincolnshire. Turns your tongue green if it's real, he says, lifting his to demonstrate. It's either died by the herbs, or he's been licking moss again. Jury's out. Historians still argue whether medieval cheese was truly palatable by modern standards. Some claim that longer aging times, lack of pasteurization, and wildly inconsistent bacteria cultures made for wildly inconsistent flavors, some delightful, some challenging. You suspect yours is on the better end, barely. And here's your quirky tidbit for the evening. Some inns had cheese luck. Superstition held that if the innkeeper cut the cheese the wrong way against the grain or outside of a waxing moon cycle, it could curse a traveler's journey. So, yes, you might have just eaten a hex. No refunds. You wash it down with a final sip of your now lukewarm ale. The pairing works in that it's edible and not actively offensive. Around the room, others are nibbling the same strange little blocks. One man dips his in ale. Another uses it to scoop out the remains of his pottage. You grimace. There are no culinary rules here, just mild desperation and the promise of sleep. A boy seated on a barrel nearby plucks a soft, round cheese from his pouch. Brie like oozing slightly in the heat. A woman beside him gasps. That's church cheese, she hisses, saved for feast days. He shrugs, scoops it onto a trencher crust, and devours it with the calm defiance of someone who knows confession isn't until Sunday. You close your eyes for a second, letting the murmur of the inn settle around you. Somewhere, someone's still arguing about whether goats make better cheese than cows. Someone else insists they once ate a cheese aged so long, it developed a personality and voted in a local election. In a quieter corner, a gray-bearded man describes Bishop's cheese a richer, creamier style only served to clergy and nobility. Made with extra cream, sometimes double-milked, sometimes enhanced with egg yolk or honey. Made your teeth tingle, he mutters. You believe him, either from the flavor or the early stages of lactose-related hallucination.
Ow.
Your own cheese brick is dwindling now. You nibble the final corner, noting how it's begun to soften ever so slightly in your hand. That strange cheese oil sheen appears, the sign of real dairy and no refrigeration. You wipe your fingers on your tunic and pretend not to notice the stain it leaves behind. At the hearth, someone's started roasting something on a stick. Maybe an onion, maybe a fruit. It sizzles softly, sending a sweet charred smell into the room. Your cheese seems even saltier by comparison. It balances oddly well. There's comfort in this strange sequence bread that could hurt you, ale that could hydrate you, pottage that could confuse you, and now cheese that could ... embalm you. Each course a step deeper into the medieval midnight maze. Each bite a lullaby you have to chew. You rest your hands on your lap. Your belly's warm now, your limbs heavy. The fire crackles with a kind of domestic rhythm. Even the rats in the beams seem slower, more polite. The cheese has done its job. Someone in the back corner starts humming a lullaby. It's low and slow, the kind of tune meant to soothe children or confuse demons. A good one, in other words. You glance toward the counter and see the innkeeper pulling something from a basket small, golden, and wrapped in leaves. You blink. Could it be dessert? Then again, in this place, that could mean anything from honeyed nuts to boiled hedgehog. Let's hope for nuts. You squint at the small golden bundle the innkeeper places in front of a yawning traveler. Wrapped in what looks like a broad chestnut leaf, tied with a bit of frayed twine, it almost resembles a tiny gift. The traveler pokes it skeptically, then unties it and peels back the leaf. Inside, nestled like a surprise, is a sweet, sticky fig, cake dense, dark, and humming with the scent of cloves and honey. Well, looks like medieval inns did have desserts, sort of, where you watch as others nearby also receive their portions. Some of them unwrap theirs with reverence, others with confusion. One man simply bites straight through the leaf and shrugs. You ever the cautious gourmet until your own arrives. When it does, it's warm from sitting near the hearth. It's fragrant and slightly squashed, like it's been hugged a little too tightly by a traveling monk. You peel it open. The sweetness hits first. Fruity. Molasses. Deep. Dried figs, certainly, but probably also dates or raisins, mashed together with honey and coarse breadcrumbs. Maybe even a splash of ale. You take a bite and it clings to your teeth like it is trying to become part of you. Welcome to the sweet end of a long medieval day. Fruitcakes, honey confections, and sticky little miracles. These figgy cakes weren't cakes as you know them. No flour, no eggs, no leavening. Just dried fruit mashed with bread, bound with honey or fat and formed into hand-sized lumps. Sometimes spiced with cinnamon or nutmeg, if the innkeeper was feeling generous or had relatives in the spice trade. Historians still argue whether such spiced treats were genuinely common or just aspirational. Recorded in cookbooks few could afford to follow. You notice yours has a faint citrus temps, possibly from preserved lemon peel, possibly from being stored next to the pickled eels. Hard to say. A nearby guest holds up a similar cake, squints, and declares, "This one's got fennel." Soap. He takes another bite. Nope, definitely fennel. Medieval inns didn't usually offer extravagant desserts, but that didn't mean sweet cravings went unanswered. Traveling merchants sometimes traded in dried fruits, figs, dates, even imported prunes. Had a little leftover bread, a lot of mashing, and a spoonful of whatever sweetener you could steal from the bees. And a midnight snack with delusions of pastry. A quirky tradition from the southern shires involved adding ashes, fireplace ashes to the mix for a smoky flavor. Whether it actually enhanced the taste or just stretched the ingredients is generously up for debate. You glance at your leaf wrapper and wonder if the gray smudge on the bottom is seasoning or just medieval cleanliness. You tear off another piece. It's more addictive than expected. Your jaw does most of the work chewing through the density like it's late for a meeting, but the taste, it lingers. It's warm, rich, oddly comforting. It's almost like a granola bar that's been left out in the sun and reimagined by a candlemaker. The man next to you pulls a honeycomb chunk from his pouch. It gleams in the firelight's sticky gold, brittle with age. He breaks off a piece and dips it in his ale, then offers you a bit with the solemnity of a knight presenting a relic. You accept. The honey hits hard, floral, sharp, probably from wildflowers in sheer bee panic. Sweet things in medieval inns were rare but appreciated. Honey was the MVP of the sugarless world, used not only to sweeten but also to preserve, glaze, and occasionally cover up flavors best left unnamed. Dried fruits, too, were prized. Even the poorest inns sometimes kept a sack of raisins or sour apples by the hearth, dried and tough as saddle leather, but still good for stewing or snacking. In coastal inns, guests might get a bit of quince paste or fruit jelly, what some called marchpane, if made with nuts and sugar. But for most travelers, sweets like this fig cake were the closest they'd come to luxury. A soft reward after long days, bad weather, and unpredictable company. You finish your cake, the sweetness is still on your tongue, stubborn and syrupy. You resist licking your fingers, mostly because they haven't been washed since the Crusades. The room has quieted again. Chewing slows. Plates are emptied. A child is curled in a blanket near the hearth, cradling a crust like a teddy bear. The hum of late-night satisfaction settles over the inn, like a quilt patched together from crumbs, salt, and soft murmurs. Was in the rafters, a small bag dangles, possibly filled with preserved plums or nuts. An innkeeper's late-night snack stash, or maybe an offering to the rodent deities, you'll never know. A few guests rise, stretching, groaning, muttering about sore backs and cold feet. You don't move. The sweetness anchors you. Your limbs feel syrupy too. Someone begins retelling a tale about a nobleman who choked on a fig cake, swore it was bewitched, and banned them from his court. The man beside you snorts, he just couldn't chew. You silently vow to chew more next time. The fire spits once, then quiets. One last ember flares and falls. The smell of honey and herbs still floats faintly in the air like a memory. And just when you think you've had your last bite of the night, the innkeeper appears again, this time with a bowl of steaming milk, lightly spiced. You blink. Warm milk.
What?
Midnight. Apparently, the medieval bedtime menu still has more to offer. The bowl of milk is warm against your palms, smooth clay slightly scorched on one side. Steam drifts up in lazy ribbons, curling like smoke signals to the ceiling beams. You inhale. It smells faintly of nutmeg, maybe cinnamon, or maybe that's just what your nose wants to believe. Either way, it's creamy, soothing, and suspiciously comforting. You take a sip. It's sweetened, gently, not cloying, just enough to soften the tang of animal. This isn't your overly processed modern milk. This is straight from the cow, or possibly the goat, with all the quirks that implies. It coats your tongue like warm velvet, with a lingering note of hay and hearth. And yes, there's a pinch of something spicy in there. It's possibly mace. Possibly just last week's stew, residue in the pot. Again, you've learned not to ask. This, it turns out, was a common medieval sleepaid, warm milk with spices or honey. It's often given late at night in inns, especially to guests who looked particularly road-weary or deliriously cold. You definitely qualify. Notched. A hunched man to your left says it was called milk posset in some places. You glance over. He gestures with his spoon like a priest with a censer. Best with ale, he rasps, curdles it real nice. You blink. Did he say ale? Yes. Yes, he did. And here's your historical fact. In the later Middle Ages, posset became a popular medicinal nightcap, hot milk. Mixed with ale or wine, curdled into a thickened drink that was believed to cure everything from the common cold to heartbreak. People added spices like ginger, clove, and saffron if they were wealthy or desperate. Some possets were so thick they had to be eaten with a spoon. Others were nearly drinkable if you squinted. Yours isn't curdled, thankfully. Smooth, and by some miracle, actually soothing. You sip again, and your shoulders begin to forget the weight of your pack. Your spine releases a groan, the kind only a stone bench, 3 hours of chewing, and one overachieving cheese brick can cause. The innkeeper, possibly noticing your slightly stunned expression, sets down a small tray of seed cakes. They're plain coin-sized discs, speckled with caraway and poppy. Not exactly cookies, but not cookies either. You nibble one. It shatters softly, a whisper of crunch and crumb, the seeds popping lightly under your teeth. Earthy, herbal, weirdly nostalgic. You never thought caraway could make you feel feelings. Seed cakes weren't extravagant, but they were filling, easy to store, and a clever use of basic ingredients. Butter or lard, flour, sugar, if you had it, and seeds, sometimes aniseed, sometimes cumin, regional thing, like accents or poultry theft. Bakers made them in bulk for travelers, markets, or festivals. And inns, well, if you were lucky and the cook was bored, you got a few with your milk. One eccentric friar at the table next to you insists seed cakes were used to predict fortunes. If the seeds fell in a certain pattern on your lap, you'd find love. Or lice. Historians still argue whether this was genuine superstition or just a way to explain clumsy eating. The fire pops again. Someone stirs their posset and lets out a contented groan that turns into a snore halfway through. No one minds. These late hours are made for collapsing, digesting, and slowly sinking into sleep, like a flour sack into syrup. A fringe tidbit for you. In some regions, innkeepers would add sleep herbs to the milk or cakes, things like chamomile, valerian root, or even lettuce juice. Yes, lettuce. Apparently, in medieval medical texts, lettuce was believed to calm the nerves and promote rest. So your salad, it's a soporific. You sip again and wonder if your milk has any extra herbs. It is awfully calming. Almost too calming, you don't mind. Someone across the room is softly singing a tune about cows and moonlight. It's out of tune, mostly vowels, and more of a mumble by the end, but it fits. The scent of warm milk now mingles with ash and wood smoke, and the sugar on your tongue has settled into a sort of ghost. Your limbs are molten now, sinking deeper into the bench. You understand in this moment why monks lived on simple things. There's a holiness to warm milk and seeds at the right hour, when the world is mostly asleep and the dangers of the road feel distant and fictional. Another patron near the fire begins to snore, head tipped back, mouth open like a drawbridge. A dog curls against his boot. You don't remember the dog being there earlier? Maybe it comes with a nap? Break another cake in half and listen to the room breathing around you. This, perhaps more than the stew or the ale or the cheese, is what the medieval inn did best. It brought your body back to rest. Fed it, warmed it, and then slowly whispered it toward unconsciousness. Still, you notice one man hasn't touched his posset. He swirls it, frowns, and mutters, "They used sour milk again. I swear they're trying to pickle my guts." Another traveler chuckles and raises his bowl like a toast. Two soft guts, then. There's no arguing at this hour. No fighting left. Just sighs and slow chewing. You tilt your bowl, finish the last of the warm milk. The final sip is thicker, with a whisper of grain at the bottom, a residue from the spices, or a bit of yesterday's barley. Hard to say. Either way, it's satisfying. Almost ceremonial. And as you set the bowl down, the innkeeper gives you a look, half acknowledgement, half warning. The kind that says, if you want more, ask now. Or forever hold your wheeze. But you don't need more. You're full. Or maybe just heavy with peace. The room flickers. Shadows drift lazily across the ceiling. One of the beams creaks like an old man stretching. Another traveler wraps a cloak around their shoulders, curls up near the hearth like a cat. You close your eyes just for a second. The warmth is inside you now, seed, spice, and milk. Your breath slows, your jaw unclenches. You've officially reached peak medieval snack, dad. And just as you think you've had your fill of strange foods, you catch a new scent. Earthy, root-like, faintly sour. A new bowl appears. What fresh snack is this? You peek and it's gruel, of course it's gruel. The bowl in front of you is ... beige. That's really the only word that comes to mind. Beige, with maybe a slight greenish tint if you tilt it toward the firelight. It steams faintly, like it's trying to escape unnoticed. You stare into it, and it stares back, thick, gloppy, unapologetically lumpy. This is gruel, the unsung anti-hero of the medieval midnight menu. You take a cautious sniff. It smells like boiled oats, old wood, and possibly damp cloth. Not offensive, exactly just humble. Very, very humble. The kind of humble that wears socks with holes and never asks for seconds. Still, it's warm. And at this hour, after everything else you've sampled, that might be enough. You dip your spoon in and lift a dollop. It lands in your mouth like a soft, soggy fist, slightly salty, vaguely weedy. You chew, although it's not strictly necessary, and swallow. And you know what? It's not terrible. It's boring, sure, but it's a comforting sort of boring. Like chewing on a sleepy memory. Gruel was a staple dish in inns, especially at odd hours. It was cheap, endlessly variable, and it required almost no active cooking. Just toss grain into water. Maybe stir once or twice, then let it sit near a flame. Until it transformed into this steaming blob of sustenance. Oats, barley, millet, sometimes rye or even spelt if you were somewhere fancy. Often flavored with a bit of animal fat, salt, or if the cook was feeling particularly festive, a pinch of dried herb or a spoonful of ale. No sugar, no flair, just calories. Sleepy, easy calories. Historians still argue whether gruel served at inns was deliberately bland to stretch the portions, or whether it was just so normalized that no one questioned the lack of effort. Either way, it was dependable. Like rain or taxes. Or someone coughing behind you all night, you eat a few more spoonfuls. They slide down like warm cement. You're not entirely sure you're enjoying this, but your body seems grateful. The gruel feels medicinal, like something that doesn't care about your opinion, it's here to do a job. Across the room, a woman stirs her own bowl and says it reminds her of her grandmother's kitchen. Another traveler immediately replies, "Mine reminds me of my grandmother's punishment." You all chuckle softly, bonded in this moment of communal meh. A fringe tidbit from a monk's travel journal suggests that gruel was occasionally used as a base for slumber potions, with herbs like poppy, mugwort, or lettuce juice added in for good measure. Not to be confused with dinner. Or maybe to be exactly confused with dinner. Tonight's bowl thankfully seems herb-free, just warm, thick, and undemanding. You try adding a few leftover crumbs of seed cake to yours, experimenting with texture like a true medieval food scientist. It helps, slightly. The seeds give a bit of crunch, and the sweetness from the cake goes into the porridge like a whisper of joy. You're not reinventing the wheel here, but you've invented bland with benefits. Nearby, a young apprentice mutters about the gruel, at another inn being better, more body, less water. He gets several skeptical glances and one eyebrow raise that says, "Sure, Jan, nod." Another man swears by adding a splash of onion broth to the mix. Opens the lungs, he declares, and then coughs dramatically to prove his point. It's not persuasive. Still, there's something oddly satisfying about this midnight gruel. It's the food equivalent of a soft, damp wool blanket. Scratchy at first, but eventually comforting in its heavy, undignified way. You remember reading somewhere that monks and nuns ate gruel during fast, mostly because it had zero pleasure involved, which made it spiritually efficient, apparently. In your current state, though, it's not ascetic, it's just soothing. You look around the inn. Most bowls are half finished, set aside as guests slip into sleep. One man's head is slumped forward, chin barely above his porridge. You wonder briefly if he's napping or drowning. Turns out he's snoring, and his bowl is catching the rhythm. The dog has moved again, now tucked beneath a table, one paw twitching, maybe dreaming of meat, or of a better class of gruel. You finish your bowl. The last spoonful is the thickest. You resist the urge to sculpt it into a medieval emoji, just barely. The innkeeper clears a few bowls without a word, his movements soft now, like even he's starting to drift. You imagine he's eaten more gruel than any one man should in a lifetime. Someone suggests toasting the end of the meal with a dash of mead, but is swiftly reminded that mead costs more than their combined outfits. Instead, another guest pulls out a skin of diluted cider, passes it around, and everyone takes a polite sip. It's mostly water, with a ghost of apple. But hey, it's the thought and the alcohol content that counts. You lean back, belly full of oats and barely sweetened memory. You're not energized. You're not even satisfied in the usual sense. You're just ... still, like a puddle. That's what gruel offers. Quietness. No surprises. No cravings stirred. Just enough fuel to get you to dawn without dreaming of empty stomachs. The fire has settled to embers. Ash crumbles like snowflakes in slow motion. The air smells faintly of barley steam and candle wax. A few patrons mumble softly in their sleep, words slurring like poetry from a cracked mouth. The inn creaks with age, wind pressing gently against the shuttered windows. It's the kind of creak that sounds like it's trying to remember something. It's maybe the last 1,000 bowls of gruel it's witnessed. You, for your part, are still seated, but barely. Your limbs are liquid. Your eyes feel like pockets of warm dough. Outside, you can hear owls calling, or possibly a drunk minstrel yelling at a cart. Inside, it's just the rhythm of breath, the occasional sniffle, and the distant drip of something leaking. Hopefully not the gruel pot. And just when you think you've experienced every snack this place has to offer, a new scent enters the room, sharp, vinegary, unmistakably fermented. Pickled eggs, because of course. Smell hits you sideways, sharp, briny, a little bit aggressive. Like someone bottled the essence of sour surprise and unleashed it into the room. You wrinkle your nose and turn your head, but it's too late. The pickled eggs have arrived and they are proud of it. A clink of crockery announces their presence. A thick earthenware jar lands on a nearby table with a dull thud. The lid scrapes off, and even though you try not to look, you do. You always do. Floating in the cloudy liquid are orbs, some pale, some tinged slightly green, and one pink, best not to ask. A large man with suspiciously clean fingernails reaches in and plucks one out, lets it drip, and pops it into his mouth like a bar snack. The crunch echoes slightly. This, apparently, is the final course in tonight's medieval and midnight snack parade. The mighty pickled egg. You did not ask for this. And yet here we are. Pickled eggs in the Middle Ages weren't just a curiosity, they were practical preservation. Without refrigeration, innkeepers had to get creative. Eggs were submerged in mixtures of vinegar, brine, or ale, lazy sometimes with herbs like dill, mustard seed, or bay leaf for weeks or even months. The result? A food that could last through the cold months, withstand travel, and act as both garnish and gut challenge. Some inns offered them as part of a midnight sobering plate, a way to balance the tankards of ale, maybe settle a queasy belly, or at least shock your palate back to consciousness. It's unclear whether this was effective or just wishful culinary thinking. Historians still argue whether pickled eggs were a regional indulgence or a widespread custom. What is clear is this: they leave an impression. You get handed one without asking. It's warm, not hot room warm. It's a kind of warm that makes you second-guess the decision to touch it, let alone eat it. But you're brave now. You've survived the cheese brick. You've endured the gruel. What's one little fermented egg? You bite. The shell's already gone, of course, so your teeth sink right into the white or rubbery, slightly squeaky texture that's oddly satisfying, like chewing on resolve. The taste? Vinegar forward, then sulfur. Then a weird whisper of something medicinal, like time left too long in a windowsill. It's not bad. It's intense. You chase it with a gulp of tepid water from the communal jug. It helps. Slightly, the innkeeper sees your expression and chuckles. Clears the senses, don't it? Clears something, certainly. A few others are enjoying theirs with gusto. One guest dips his egg in coarse salt before each bite. Another peels his into segments and shares them with a sleepy hound curled at his feet, who eats the egg bits with alarming joy. You're not sure what this says about either of them? A fringe account from a 14th century soldier-esque memoir describes pickled eggs being eaten with pickled onions and a hunk of brown bread before long rides. To brace the gut, he writes, that's either marketing or a warning. The vinegar temps lingers on your tongue long after the last bite. You feel awake again, mildly affronted by your own taste buds, but weirdly invigorated. Pickled eggs don't lull you toward sleep, they shove you toward the edge of it and dare you to leap. The man next to you sighs contentedly. Better than anything I had in France. A pause. Though they had frogs, I'll grant them that. The table nods solemnly, as if frog comparison is a nightly ritual. Someone else offers the theory that pickled eggs were the medieval version of a probiotic. Gut health, you see, he says, patting his rounded belly. That's why I eat 4. You nod respectfully, though. Privately question whether a belly that size came from just vinegar and virtue. The inn is quieter now. Even the eggs can't keep people upright much longer. One woman falls asleep mid-chew, her head landing gently on a folded cloak. Jaw keeps moving for 2 more seconds. A true professional. You notice the innkeeper beginning to close the jar? It's heavy with the smell of brine and ancient decisions. He places a large flat rock over the lidless version of a seal. Perhaps he nudges it into the shadows of a side shelf. You swear the jar lets out a little burp as it's moved. The fire has dimmed to a whisper of red coals. A dog whines in its sleep. The wind at the window rattles faintly, and the beams overhead crackle as if settling in for the night too. Your belly, now full of a strange stew of oats, milk, cheese, and vinegar, shifts slightly, negotiating peace with itself. There is no room for regret, only digestion. In the corner, a shadowy figure slowly rises, grabs their cloak, and makes their way toward the back, presumably the sleeping loft or the straw pile out back. You're too cozy to care. You lean back, eyes fluttering just a little. It's not quite sleep, but something close. A waiting, a slowing down. And then, a voice. I hear they've got dried fruit tonight. You snap your eyes open. Dried fruit. The rarest of medieval and luxuries. Often reserved for feast days, wealthy guests, Or that one guy who trades spices and always smells like cloves? A plate appears, carried carefully by a young serving girl with singed hair and sleepy eyes. It's small, clearly guarded, but real. Scattering of preserved apples, pears, and maybe a fig or two. Dried in the autumn sun, chewy, sweet, and precious. You blink slowly, watching the plate make its way across the room. The innkeeper catches your eye, raises a brow, silently asks, "You want one?" You nod, just once. After pickled eggs, you've earned it. The fig is warm from the fire's edge, slightly sticky between your fingers, and dense in the way that only something truly dehydrated and ancient can be. You take a bite, and instantly, it's like your mouth has been rewound to a summer orchard briefly sweet, darkly rich, with a little crunch from those tiny seeds that feel like edible sand. You sigh without meaning to. The dried fruit plate is modest, maybe 5 pieces total in apple curl here, a sliver of pear, a halved plum that looks like it's been mummified in sugar, and 2 figs. You cradle your portion carefully, as if you've been handed a treasure map. Because in medieval inns, preserved fruit really was treasure. Drying fruit was one of the few ways to enjoy sweetness out of seasoned sun-drying. When weather allowed otherwise, using the residual warmth of an oven after the bread was baked, a clever bit of multitasking that no doubt saved some innkeeper's neck come Lent. Even better, dried fruit traveled well, didn't spoil quickly, and doubled as both dessert and digestive aid. It was a win for both your taste buds and your intestines. You chew slowly, savoring the chew. It's not candy exactly, but it has the same intention, and intention counts. Historians still argue whether dried fruit served at inns was mainly imported from trade routes, meaning pricey. Mediterranean figs and raisins or whether most of it was dried locally. Some accounts suggest that even commoners could get their hands on dried pears or crab apples if they knew the right orchard or weren't above a little creative borrowing from monastic gardens. Tonight, though, you're not asking questions. You're just eating. The apple is tangy, not the modern, crisp kind, but the softer, leathery version that comes from weeks in a dark pantry and a little wishful thinking. The pear tastes faintly of smoke. You imagine it hung over a hearth to dry, catching bits of ash-like flavor confetti. A nearby guest bites into a raisin and gives a small, joyful hum. Tastes like church, he says. You glance sideways, wondering what sort of services he's been attending. Maybe he means massive amounts of incense and an almond cookie on holy days. You trade one of your fig halves for a slice of someone's preserved quince. It's a fair deal. The quince is firm, floral, slightly bitter like biting into a memory. You're not sure if it's good, but it's definitely thoughtful. A very ponder life kind of fruit. A fringe diary entry by a traveling herbalist claims that dried apricots were once offered as currency at a northern inn, 3 slices for a night's hobed. Which honestly sounds like a bargain, given how they taste like sunshine trapped in a fruit wallet. You've never seen one, though. Not here. Tonight's haul is domestic, local, real. The young server who passed out the plate slumps down by the hearth, stealing the last pear slice for herself with 0 guilt. Someone fakes colds her. She grins and pops it into her mouth, chewing like she just got away with something important. You love that for her? The fire dims another degree, and the coals look more like crushed rubies now. Shadows stretch out, then curl up again like sleepy cats. The smell of vinegar has finally faded, replaced by faint fruit sugar and waxed wood. There's a peace that settles over the room now. It's a kind that only comes after salt, starch, and sweet. Your stomach no longer protests. Your eyelids are slightly gummy. Your thoughts start trailing off, mid-sentence, like they're not entirely committed to finishing the conversation. A man mutters something about fig trees in Italy. Someone else mumbles a vague disagreement that may or may not involve goats. You don't follow the thread and no one seems to care. The whole inn is drowsy with satisfaction. There's a warmth in your chest, not from wine or meat, but from the strange comfort of this dried fruit. The knowledge that someone thought ahead, preserved a little sweetness, and saved it for nights like this. Nights when the cold clings to the shutters, and you need something to remind you that life has flavor. You brush your fingertips together, dislodging fig seeds and a bit of sugar that doesn't sparkle but feels like it should. You stretch. Not a big dramatic stretch, just the kind that signals to your body that the business of the day is done. That the final course has been served. That you've survived another round of medieval midnight snacking without falling off a bench or insulting someone. It's pickling technique. The fire pops. The last of the fruit is gone. and from somewhere you hear it the unmistakable creak of a ladder. A guest begins the slow, careful climb up to the sleeping loft above. The wood groans in protest, but holds. One by one, the others follow suit. Cloaks wrapped around shoulders, boots in hand, eyes half closed. You're not in a rush. You've got one more moment to savor. One more bite, one more breath. Then you hear it. A soft clink, a tiny bell. Small tray appears on the counter. It holds something dark, something nutty, something that, frankly, no one expected at this hour. Is that? Almond brittle. Your eyes widen. Several guests perk up, sniff the air, and exchange knowing glances. Looks like there's one more surprise in the medieval snack lineup after all. You're not sure how it'll taste, or if you'll even get a piece. But that little clink of sugar against pottery. Yeah, that just rewound your sleep clock by 15 delicious minutes. You try not to bolt toward the tray like a dog that just heard the food bowl fill. You're a mature adult, seasoned traveler, a connoisseur of weird medieval textures. But almond brittle? Yes. That's not just a snack, it's hope in edible form. It rests on a rough, slate-colored platter near the innkeeper's elbow. At first glance, it's humble flat, irregularly shaped, browned around the edges like it's seen things. But up close, you spot the shimmer. Amber-hued sugar, sticky in spots, dotted with slivered nuts. The scent wafting from it is roasted, toasty, and unmistakably promising. The innkeeper breaks a few uneven pieces and drops them on a cloth-lined dish. Cook overdid the honey, he grunts. Still waste not indeed. You're practically vibrating. You reach for a piece. It crunches in your hand, with a sound so sharp it could be a punctuation mark. As you bite, the sugar gives way to warmth and richness. The almond inside is roasted, slightly bitter against the candied backdrop. Not the fluffy sweetness of modern dessert, but intense, concentrated flavor. Like the Middle Ages are punching you in the mouth and apologizing afterward with a hug. The guests around you chew with a reverence normally reserved for prayers or scandalous gossip. A few nod solemnly. One actually closes his eyes. You think someone in the back may be crying softly, but that could just be indigestion. Almond brittle, sometimes called confit of almonds or subtleties of nut paste, was usually the domain of noble tables, or at least wealthier households. Sugar wasn't cheap after all, and almonds had to be imported unless you lived in warmer climates. But inns along major trade roads? They could snag a deal? Or, more likely, had a cook who knew a merchant who knew a monk with a sweet tooth. Some fringe accounts even describe medieval sugarworks competitions, wherein cooks would craft elaborate shapes from almond paste and honey dragons, castles, even scandalous figures. But here, in this inn, it's simpler. A slab of warmth and crunch. No dragons, just joy. Historians still argue whether confections like this were made in-house at inns or brought in by traveling vendors. Theories abound that certain towns specialized in nut candies, dispatching sticky-fingered apprentices with satchels full of brittle and a prayer they wouldn't eat the profits. You chew slowly. Bits of almond stick in your teeth and you're not mad about it. The honey flavor is dark, maybe even a little burnt. It's caramelized over a fire that was probably also cooking someone's porridge. Efficiency, thy name is medieval cookery. You chase it with a sip of warm cider, the spices mellowing the sugar. Your mouth, which has been through vinegar, curd, oats, and questionable stew tonight, feels like it's come home. You exhale fully, as if you've just completed a holy rite. One older man with a deep brow and tired boots whispers to no one in particular, "This tastes like my wedding." The room hums with sleepy laughter. Then a woman offers a counterpoint. "Tastes like the time my cart broke, and I had to sleep in a bee shed." You're not sure how this relates to almonds, but you respect the honesty. A fringe anecdote from a Flemish merchant's record book claims that brittle-style sweets were sometimes used as token-zatable gifts exchanged during negotiations or before long departures. Something about shared sweetness creating goodwill. Honestly, you'd sign any deal with a piece of this in hand? The warmth from the brittle spreads through you, as if your bloodstream's been dusted with sugar. The sharpness of the night blurs a little. Your thoughts begin to drift, not unpleasantly, like a boat on lazy water. Around you, the inn breathes like a single sleeping creature, quiet shuffles, contented murmurs, the gentle clatter of dishes being tucked away. The fire's almost out now, just a low orange glow with a few poppings, like faraway fireworks. The youngest server tips a bucket of ashes on top, sealing it for the night. You tuck the last corner of brittle into your mouth, letting it dissolve slowly. It clings to your molars, pulls a bit as it melts. You don't fight it. Snack isn't meant to be rushed. It's meant to linger like a whisper of indulgence in a world of root vegetables and scarcity. And now there's movement again. Someone starts arranging the benches back into their sleeping positions. Blankets are passed out, itchy and thick, but welcome. You're handed one without fanfare, and instinctively wrap it around your shoulders like a ceremonial cloak. You are full. You are warm. You are possibly 40% dairy products at this point. Still seated, you lean back against the beam behind you. The candlelight plays across the ceiling in sleepy patterns. A moth flutters nearby, then thinks better of it and disappears. Good call. Someone begins humming a low, almost tuneless melody that sounds more like breathing with a purpose than an actual song. No one tells them to stop. This is the winding down. The brittle was the final crescendo. Now it's all hushes and nestling.
Ow.
The inn is becoming its own lullaby. You close your eyes briefly and picture the almond brittle, a ganglinting in the firelight, humble and miraculous. A snack made from 3 things: patience, heat, and enough sugar to make a monk sin. The innkeeper passes one last piece to a boy curled on a bench. Last one till next week, he says. The boy cradles it like treasure and slowly crunches, eyes shining in the flickering glow. You smile into the darkness, sleep tugging more urgently now. Your body is heavy in the best way, not weighed down, rooted. And somewhere in the kitchen, you imagine a pot still sticky with honey, quietly soaking in a basin. The brittle is gone. But the warmth stays with you. You hear it before you see it, the soft clatter of ceramic, a wooden spoon tapping the side of a pot, and the unmistakable slosh of something thick being ladled into a bowl. A scent follows close behind. Cinnamon, a touch of clove, and the mellow warmth of something starchy. You sniff once, twice. Your brain starts guessing. Is that rice? You shuffle over. Blanket still wrapped around your shoulders like a medieval tortilla. Door. Sure enough, it's a steaming bowl of something pale and gloppy being handed out in modest portions. A few people wrinkle their noses. Others smile as if they've just been greeted by an old friend. It's rice pudding, or what passes for it in a medieval inn. Not the silky custard kind you might expect in modern kitchens. This one's thicker, almost stiff. It's more like a scoop than a pour, and the grains of rice are fully committed plump, soft, barely holding their shape. The milk, probably goat or sheep, has taken on a yellowish tint from the hearth's heat. You spot a few errant raisins bobbing at the edges, having survived the previous course. A spoon's handed to you, wooden, worn, slightly curved from years of service. You dig in. It's comforting, not dazzling, not showy, but deeply, soulfully good, like a lullaby in edible form. The sugar is subtle, if present at all. The flavor leans on the spice of cinnamon if you're lucky, a dusty pinch of nutmeg if someone was really showing off. There's a faint taste of salt underneath, just enough to remind you this isn't dessert for royalty. This is practical luxury. A warming bowl meant to quiet the stomach and soften the night's edges. Historians still argue whether rice pudding reached medieval inns via Moorish influence, early Crusader trade routes, or desperate kitchen experimentation. Rice wasn't native to most of Europe, so anyone serving it probably had good merchant connections, or a cook with adventurous tendencies. You mentally high-fived the latter. The serving woman wipes her hands on her apron and mutters, "Wasn't supposed to boil over." You spot a little scorch along the rim of the pot. No one seems to care. Someone nearby says, "Tastes better burnt anyway," and scoops a blackened edge like it's the prize corner of a brownie pan. A young lad next to you stirs his pudding thoughtfully, fishing out 2 raisins and placing them neatly on the table. "They stare at me," he whispers. You don't ask. The pudding thickens in the bowl as it cools. You eat it slowly, each bite turning your limbs into syrup. The inn has gone full whisper mode, no rustle and straw, someone's low hum, a yawn that feels contagious. Even the fire barely crackles anymore. It just ... radiates. Some guests dip bits of bread into their pudding, turning it into an improvised mush. Others crumble hard cheese on top. You spy one fellow shaking what might be dried herbs over his mint. Maybe. Bold move. You stick to the original formula? It feels like the kind of food you trust implicitly. No secrets, no surprises, just warmth. There is a fringe recipe found in an old French cookbook that describes rice boiled in almond milk, sweetened with honey, then layered with dried cherries. It sounds decadent, almost suspiciously modern. But here in this inn, the recipe is simpler. No cherries, no layers, just rice, milk, spice, and thyme. A few guests have dozed off, mid-bite, spoon still in hand. The innkeeper lets them be. This is not a place where decorum outranks drowsiness. Someone places another log gently on the coals. The light pulses. You look down and realize your pudding's nearly gone. The spoon scrapes softly against the bowl, catching the last creamy drag. You don't bother licking it, but the thought crosses your mind. You lean back again, the wooden bench oddly more comfortable now. Maybe it's the pudding doing magic from the inside out. Or maybe your standards have lowered progressively with each snack tonight. Either way, you feel wrapped inside and out. A group of travelers in the corner begin stacking their bowls, exchanging tired smiles. You speak a language you don't understand, but their body language is universal. That half nod of satisfaction, stretching limbs, the shared glance that says, "We made it to midnight without freezing or fainting." Rice pudding wasn't always a midnight thing. In some regions, it was a feast dish. In others, it served as a recovery meal blend, soft, easy on the guts. But in this moment, it's transformed. It's not just a food, it's a full-bodied sigh. You pull your blanket tighter, grateful. You've eaten vinegar eggs, thick-cut cheese, dubious stews, pickled vegetables, and now this sweet, soft ending. Somehow, each course has pulled you deeper into the rhythm of this place, into the soft thud of wooden bowls, the hush of the fire, the barely there background music of tired humans surviving another day. Your spoon clinks softly into the empty bowl, and you set it on the bench beside you. In the firelight, someone scribbles in a tiny book, probably a clerk or a scribe, recording travel notes. Maybe they'll mention the pudding. Maybe centuries from now, someone will find the note and scoff at the ingredients. No saffron, no cardamom. Peasants, you smile to yourself. The lad with the raisin phobia is snoring now, one boot halfway on. Another guest lies fully prone, blanket over the face like a ghost in repose. You hear someone whisper a lullaby, low and off-key, probably for themselves. The pudding has done its job. It's the closing act. The edible goodnight. The innkeeper walks a slow lap around the room, nodding once at each guest, like a shepherd counting sheep butt backward, making sure all the sheep are tucked in. You breathe out, long and low, as your body starts its own quiet descent into stillness. Your thoughts drift to rice paddies far away, to the hands that harvested this simple grain, to the long journey it took to land in a wooden bowl in a drafty little inn in your sleepy hands. What a journey for something so small. So soft, you think you understand it. You are also small, also soft, also at peace, here at the end of things. You're not sure what time it is anymore. The concept has started to feel as soft and bendy as the bread soaking in someone's forgotten bowl across the room. Your full, heavy-limbed eyelids, like velvet drapes. And yet, just when you think it's over, there's one last thing. A server, slow-footed and soot-dusted, emerges from the kitchen with a tray. Not much on it. It's just a squat clay jug, warm to the touch, and a few battered mugs, mismatched like teeth in an old jaw. Something about the ritual of it pulls you upright again. This isn't nourishment, it's ceremony. It's posset. The name alone sounds like a hiccup, or the sound a sleepy cat might make. But the drink, oh, it's a creature all its own. A medieval mashup of hot milk and alcohol, usually ale, or spiced wind, gently curdled and sweetened with honey or sugar. Sometimes egg yolks were whisked in to make it frothy, luxurious, a little like a pro de nog. Other times it was just poured over toasted breadcrumbs to thicken it into a drinkable mush. Tonight's version smells like nutmeg, maybe mace. There's a sharpness behind the creamy steam vinegar. No, definitely wine. Something red and bold enough to fight the milk and win. A mug is placed into your hands. The clay is warm, but not burning. You raise it slowly, nostrils catching that heady mix of dairy, spice, and something fermented. You brace yourself and take a sip. It's weird. There's no other word for it. And you mean that in the kindest way. The milk is smooth, thick, but not gloopy. The wine punches through the creaminess like a knight through a tapestry, and the spices, they sit in the background, waving politely. It's not the taste that grabs you, it's the feeling. The warmth that pours down your throat and into your chest, like someone has drawn a hot bath in your ribcage. Like this is medicine, you realize. Not the clinical, sharp sort, but the sleepy, cuddling kind. A drink made not to heal the body, but to soften it. It wraps itself around your insides like a lullaby in liquid form. Posset, you recall, was often served to the sick, the cold, and the heartbroken. It appears in medieval texts as a restorative. Some fringe sources even claimed it cured melancholy, though scholars today raise an eyebrow at the idea. Historians still argue whether it was truly medicinal or just an excuse to sneak in a nightcap after curfew. A few guests cradle their mugs like sleeping cats, noses buried in steam. One man dunks a crust of bread into his, soaks it until soggy, then slurps the result with eyes closed in bliss. You'd judge him, but you can't. You're on the same boat, the SS Comfort. There is a story floating around about a bishop in York who swore by posset and had it brought to him every evening, even during Lent. He claimed it was technically a tonic, not a pleasure. A loophole wrapped in milk and piety. He suspects he was very warm and very full of it. Some inns made possets in fancier vessels, ceramic pots with two handles and little pouring spouts. The kind of dish you could imagine surviving for centuries buried under some farmer's field. But here, it's simple mugs. Glazed with age, chipped with use, and filled with something that says, "Sleep now. You've earned it." You sip again, this time slower, letting the warmth spread. Your muscles respond in kind and coiling, unfurling like bread dough left to rise. The last conversation drifts through the inn like dandelion fluff. Someone's mumbling about a road washed out near the bridge. Another wonders if pigs dream. A third insists that moonlight makes bread rise faster. No one argues. Arguing would require effort. The posset hits your belly like a lullaby wearing a velvet glove. Your tongue feels heavy. Your arms feel like they're made of wool. The mug rests against your chest now, half full, but no longer calling to you. It's not a drink, it's a signal. The final bell before lights out. You glance around, most guests have surrendered. Bodies tucked under wool, boots removed in lazy abandon, cloaks repurposed as pillows. One woman is curled up next to the hearth, her cat-like snore syncing with the popping of the coals. Someone else lies flat on their back, mouth open to the rafters like they're waiting for God, or maybe more posset. And you sit a moment longer. Because this is the good part. The quiet drift between waking and dreaming, when you still feel the warmth of what you've eaten, what you've drunk, who you've become, just for tonight. A guest in a medieval inn. Tired, yes, but content. From vinegar eggs to almond brittle, from oatcake slabs to this gentle, strange cup of curdled warmth. Night has unfolded like a slightly soggy fairy tale. One snack at a time, one sleepy chew at a time. The posset is nearly cold now. You take one last sip, just because. Clings to the inside of the mug like a final whisper. You set it down on the bench beside you, careful not to clatter. Someone nearby murmurs in their sleep. You pull your blanket tighter and let your body lean, slow and inevitable, into the curve of the wood. In this moment, you're full of food you'll never taste again. In a place that probably won't exist tomorrow, surrounded by strangers who feel like kin. And as the last bit of posset settles in your stomach, you don't try to stay awake. Not anymore. Because now you're ready. The air is thick now, not just with smoke and spice, but with sleep. The kind of sleep that drapes itself over a place like a second roof. You don't notice it descend. It just arrives all at once, as if someone gently pulled a curtain between you and the world. But before you slip under, something draws your attention. A faint sound like soft crunching, not fire, not boots. Something. Drier, crisper. A woman at the edge of the hearth reaches into a sack and pulls out a curious-looking parcel. A brittle square, amber-hued, with pale flecks that catch the firelight. She cracks it like glass. The edge snaps off with a clean, sharp click. She offers a piece to a fellow traveler. "Honey wafer?" she whispers. Your ears perk up. The final act of this culinary opera is here. The midnight sweets, not everyone gets one. Hey, these are not common, but they're around. The kinds of things saved, not served, smuggled into inns and napkins and satchels, shared in whispers, exchanged in grateful nods. A bit of indulgence, a tiny luxury to nibble at the edge of sleep. You hold out your hand and she drops a piece into your palm. It's light-feathered, almost weightless. A sort of medieval candy, made from flour, sugar, and just enough egg to hold it together. Sometimes flavored with rose water, sometimes with lemon rind. This one smells like cloves and maybe orange peel. Someone cared when they made it. You can tell. You bite. It shatters between your teeth but melts almost immediately on your tongue. Sweet, but not cloying. Delicate, crisp. A dessert designed to fade, not to linger. The perfect punctuation at the end of a long, chewy paragraph of a night. These honey wafers and other such confections weren't always a part of the inn menu. Most inns didn't bother. Too much sugar, too fussy to make. But travelers would bring them along, especially the wealthier ones, or those from cities where spice merchants whispered of saffron dust and candied violets. There's debate among scholars, of course there is, about where these brittle bites originated. Some claim Italy, others point to Moorish influence in southern Spain. Recipes from as early as the 1300s list ingredients like sesame, crushed almonds, sugar syrup, and flower water. Some even include black pepper, creating a flavor contrast sharp enough to jolt you back awake. Not exactly bedtime friendly, this one though. This one was made for the hush. Another guest unwraps something else dark, sticky, almost black, licorice root taffy. He chews it with the dedication of a monk reciting psalms. Across the room, a child licks a piece of candied ginger, her eyes heavy but defiant. One last sweet before surrender. You nibble at the remaining shard in your hand. It's starting to soften from the heat of your palm, edges curling slightly like parchment exposed to flame. You pop it in your mouth before it escapes, and then you hear it crunch. Behind you, someone's pulled out a tiny pouch of toasted chickpeas, sweetened with honey and dusted with cinnamon. It sounds humble, and it is, but the taste, like a medieval peanut brittle if. Peanut brittle had a bachelor's degree in theology and a tendency to fall asleep in church. You reach for a few when offered. They're roasted, golden, warm to the touch. The sweetness clings to your fingertips. You suck it off without shame. You're past shame at this point. Your shame doesn't wear wool socks and sleep in a corner of a crowded inn, slowly savoring the crunch. The chickpeas shatter and dissolve with a whisper of spice and nuttiness. You feel your stomach nodding. Yes, this is good. This is exactly enough. These little treats, humble as they are, weren't universal. Some regions embraced them. Others saw them as a waste of good legumes. But to you, in this moment, they're the final note in a symphony of midnight comfort. Someone's unwrapped what looks like a quince pasta, small rectangle of golden jelly, so firm it holds its shape even when passed from hand to hand. It glows slightly in the firelight, like amber trapped in time. He slices it with a tiny knife and hands out slivers. You get one, and it clings to your fingers as you place it on your tongue. Flavor is tart, sweet, musky, almost like apples that went to finishing school. It's said that quince was popular among the better-stocked inns and homes of the wealthier travelers. A preserve, after all, was a way to keep fruit alive through winter. Some travelers even believed it had medicinal properties good for the stomach, soothing to the nerves, and a balm to the midnight soul. Historians still argue whether these sweetened preserves were more common in domestic kitchens than inns, or if they occasionally made their way into public houses thanks to trade with port cities like Bruges or Genoa. All you know is someone was kind enough to bring it, and now you've tasted the evening's final comfort. The inn is nearly silent now. A few murmurs here and there. The cat has returned, curled beside someone's foot. You could swear it's purring. Or maybe that's just the sound of the embers settling into sleep. The air smells faintly of honey, milk, wool, and ash. Your senses are blurred around the edges. It's full content and a little sugar drunk. The mug of posset is long gone.
Ow!
Your fingers are sticky. Your blanket is half off your shoulder, but you can't be bothered to fix it. You lie back against the timber wall. The boards cool against your skin. Someone pulls the shutters tighter. The room dips into a deeper darkness. The fire, once a stage, is now just background hum, a heartbeat a flicker, and you've tasted the night, every part of it. You've eaten like a pilgrim, like a merchant, like a tired bard with coin enough for one more bite. You've lived 1,000 years back, snack by snack, chew by chew, and now there's nothing left to taste. Only the sweetness clinging to your lips, and the sleep pulling gently at your hands. Your breath is slowed, matching the rhythm of the embers. One soft inhale, one weightless exhale. The room has settled into that shared dreamscape only travelers understand, the silent pact of proximity and privacy, of bodies resting near one another, but minds floating wherever the warmth of bread and sleep can carry them. You're almost gone, but not quite, because even now, in the quietest moment, something stirs, not a noise, a memory, a sensation, the ghost of a taste. Almond, maybe, or the sharp tickle of vinegar from that strange egg custard hours ago. Was it days? You blink slowly, eyes tracing the rough-hewn beams above. Ah, the roof creaks in its sleep, as if it too has had its fill. You imagine the inn as a belly, stuffed full of stories and stew. You were just one of its many contents, warm, digested, gently forgotten. Fire sputters gently. A few glowing logs blink like sleepy eyes. You wonder briefly what time it is, but time doesn't matter here. In this little stone and timber womb, time folds in on itself like dough kneaded by tired hands. Rats skitter somewhere overhead. You don't care? It's not your business tonight? Your head tilts slightly, resting more fully against the wool-wrapped bundle someone left behind. It smells like rosemary and smoke. You let yourself sink. And in that moment, in the almost sleep between dreaming and being, you feel something ancient click into place. Because this sleep food isn't just about taste or survival. It's about the very old, very soft magic of being taken care of being full, safe, hushed. It doesn't matter that the mattress is a sack of straw, that the inn smells vaguely like boots and onions, that your last bite was from a sweetened legume of questionable freshness. It was enough. All of it was enough. The midnight meal at a medieval inn wasn't a menu. It was a moment, a whisper before rest, a final kindness before the dark. And now, with possets still humming in your veins, your belly warm and stretched and sighing, and that last hint of honey wafer on your tongue, you let yourself go. You dream of bannocks, of dripping tarts, of egg yolks dancing in wine and milk. You dream of cracked wooden spoons, battered trenchers, and innkeepers with eyebrows like brambles. You dream of the slow, deep joy of feeding others, and of being fed like this, when the night has teeth and your limbs have nothing left to give.
Oh.
The voices are gone. The room has exhaled. Even the hearth is only whispering now. This is sleep. This is history with a full belly. This is the hush before dawn. And this is where you finally drift. Now you're far from the noise. The crackling fire has faded to its faintest glow. You can still see it, a soft golden heartbeat behind your eyelids. The rough wool beneath your cheek is cool, scratchy in a way that feels safe, not unpleasant. Your limbs are too heavy to move, which is fine because there's nothing left to reach for. You've had your bread, your broth, your sweets, and your warm mug of posset. Your story is fed. The night has nothing more to give. Let it all dissolve now. Let the gentle clatter of spoons, the smell of hearth ash, the sticky sweetness on your fingertips fade into one long, sleepy sigh. No more questions about where the almonds came from. No more guessing if vinegar eggs were actually a good idea. No more historian debates or chewy oatcakes. You've wandered enough for tonight. You've eaten like a traveler, thought like a scribe, and stretched your senses across centuries. There's nothing left to do. Let your breathing slow with the settling in. Let your thoughts curl up in corners, like cats seeking warmth. If your mind wanders, let it drift gently to a flicker of torchlight, a plate of soft cheese, a whisper in a strange tongue that only means you're safe here. You've made it through the night, and now, sleep.